Hey everyone, this is Nick from another BookTube channel. Welcome to my January wrap-up and my February TBR, where I talk about the books that I read in January and what I plan to read in February, as well as some channel updates. So if you watched my December wrap-up, you would know that I set a goal for myself to read 3 books in January, as well as 2 graphic novels or comic stories, and I overachieved, which I'm really happy about. I ended up reading 6 books and 4 graphic novels. I'm going to talk about them all a little bit today. The first book that I completed in January was Gardens of the Moon by Steven Erikson, the first book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I was very nervous about this book, but also kind of excited. I had put off reading it for about a year because I heard how challenging it was, and it ended up, it was challenging for sure, but it ended up being an extremely enjoyable read, and it never felt like a slog or boring or like a chore. I really enjoyed reading this, and I do plan to pick up Dead House Gates, the second book, sometime soon. I have some books to clear off my TBR first, and then I do plan to jump further into Malazan this year. The next book that I read in January was The Last House on Needless Street by Catriona Ward. This is a very beloved book, not by me. I really did not like this book. In fact, I would probably say that I hated it. It is a mystery that I figured out in the first 15 pages. It did absolutely nothing to surprise me. I didn't enjoy the writing style, and I just thought it was very predictable, and I really, from page 1, was not enjoying myself reading this book. I know a lot of people, especially on BookTube and BookTok and Bookstagram, they really, sing this book's praises. It was not for me. If you enjoyed it, good for you. I do have a full review of this on my page, in case you want to know more about why I didn't like it. Please check it out. I had a lot of fun with that video. And even though it's very negative, it's all in good fun, so please don't take it personally. Next up in January was Caliban's War by James S.A. Corey, the second book in the Expanse series. I loved this book. It took Leviathan Wakes and what it accomplished in that book and just doubled it. It was so much fun. The political intrigue wasn't dull, it wasn't confusing, it was very easy to follow. The new characters that are introduced here are all really strong, really well developed, and interesting to read from their points of view. So I really can't say enough good things about this book. This is another one I have a full review up on my page if you want to know more, as well as it was a joint review of this and Leviathan Wakes all in one. So check that out if you want more information on how I felt about this. Those 3 books were the ones that I set out to read for January, so once I finished those pretty quickly, I was playing with house money, so I decided to try some other stuff that I didn't intend to get to right away. The first book of that was Room to Dream by David Lynch and Christine McKenna. It's a bio-memoir about the filmmaker David Lynch. I'm a big fan of his movies and TV. I love Twin Peaks and Mulholland Drive, Blue Velvet. These are really great movies, and he seems like an interesting character, so I wanted to read more about him and just try to get some insights into the way he thinks, the way he approaches movies. It was an interesting read. I don't know that it was very riveting, and I don't know that it would be very interesting for people who are not a fan of his movies. I do have a full review of it up on my page if you want to know more about it. It was a pretty good book. Next up after that was a collection of horror novellas called Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke and Other Misfortunes by Eric LaRocca. I had not read anything by this author before. I took a chance on this book because it was on sale at Barnes & Noble. It has a great title, a great cover. It's recommended by Paul Tremblay, so I gave it a shot, and I was very pleasantly surprised by it. It is a bit disturbing and hard to read at times. I wouldn't say I loved everything about this. I think there are some parts of it that were a little too indulgent, a little too much in that direction of unnecessary gore, as well as some pretty difficult to read violent acts against like children and animals. But overall, I think that this is a pretty strong collection. I definitely want to try out some more from this author. Yeah, I would definitely recommend this one too. You can also see a full review of this on my page. And the final book that I completed in January was All the Myriad Ways by Larry Niven. This is my first Larry Niven book, and it's probably my last. I really didn't enjoy it that much. It's a pretty unimpressive short story collection. Had a couple interesting ones in here that weren't too bad, but for the most part, it just kind of felt like Larry Niven, like just giving a lecture on science fiction at times, and it just wasn't particularly interesting. Maybe I wasn't in the right frame of mind for it, but this really didn't appeal to me. I have a quick view up on my channel of this book. It's a series that I'm going to try out for books like this that don't leave much of an impact on me, but I still want to just mention them in passing on the page. So it's an under 1 minute review of just my feelings on this, although the amount of time that I've spent speaking on it right now is longer than that video. So check it out or not, I don't know. That's something I'm trying out. Okay, so that wraps up the books that I read in January, and I was actually able to read all of those in just the first 3 weeks of the month. The last week of the month, I got stuck on another book, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit when I go over my TBR. So I'm really happy I was able to get through 6 books in only 3 weeks. It's a bit more than my usual output. I did also read graphic novels in that time, and the first one that I did read was Orion by Walt Simonson. This is the first book in his Orion collections. I actually started this one in December of last year, and it just carried over into this year, so I wanted to make sure I finished it before the end of the month. This was a pretty fun book. It's not as strong as Walt Simonson's Thor, but he is still a great artist. This is later in his career. This is from the year 2000. Comics in the year 2000 were pretty garbage, and this, I would say, is probably one of the better titles from that time. There are some really great action sequences in here. Walt Simonson has not lost his touch, particularly issue number 5 in here, I think, which is just an entire issue of Orion and Darkseid fighting, is really awesome. It feels like it could have been pulled out of Simonson's Thor run. So this was a pretty fun one. I don't know if I'm going to pick up the second volume. We're going to see how I feel. Next up is the True Lives of the Fabulous Killjoys National Anthem. This is the second Killjoys comic. There was one that was released by writer Gerard Way back when the CD Danger Days for My Chemical Romance first came out. So, God, like about 7 years ago, maybe longer. I don't know. But this is him returning to that world. This was a really good read. I was particularly impressed with the art by Leonardo Romero. Wasn't familiar with his artwork before, but was really impressed by it here. Very fun energy. There's a car chase sequence in here that is really impressive. Car chases are notoriously difficult to show in comic books and have them read as exciting. Definitely not a problem here. Really enjoyed the artwork in this one. Story was pretty good too. The third graphic novel that I read was Ice Haven by Dan Clowes. If you watched my top graphic novels of 2022 video, you would know that I read Dan Clowes' Complete 8-Ball last year and thought it was fantastic. Ice Haven was originally published as an issue of 8-Ball. I think it was 8-Ball number 22. It's been reformatted for this graphic novel, so it's like half size, but it's still the complete story, and it's really, really good. There's a lot of funny stuff in here. There's just great storytelling. The art's fantastic. I really highly recommend this one. And the last graphic novel that I read in January was Fantastic Four Full Circle by Alex Ross. I just put up a full review of this one. That's the only graphic novel that I did a review of for the channel, because I just had a lot to say about it. I love the Fantastic Four, and I thought that this was a really interesting experiment. I think it was sometimes successful, sometimes a bit of a miss, but overall an effort that's worth checking out, especially if you enjoy Silver Age Marvel Comics. Okay, so that was all my reading for January. Let's move on to my TBR for February. I mentioned that a lot of those books I was able to read in the first 3 weeks of the month. That's because the last week I got kind of stuck on Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. This is going to be obviously my first book to finish in February. I'm almost halfway done with it. This has been kind of a tough read, honestly. The Stormlight Archive, I hadn't had any trouble with the previous books. This one was a bit of a slog for the first 400, 500 pages, and it's starting to pick up now, so hopefully I'm able to just breeze through the rest of it. But yeah, I hadn't really experienced that with a Stormlight book before. This one's a bit slow, but I do intend to finish it. Hopefully it's only going to take me about another week, so hopefully I could get through it quickly in February and then move on to other stuff. A book that I will be reading in February that I'm a little bit late to the party on is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. The reason I am late to that party is because I didn't want to buy the book because I'm not sure if I'm going to enjoy it. I've heard it's like cozy, slice of life fantasy about an orc opening a coffee shop or something like that. I don't know if that's going to be for me, so I didn't want to buy a copy of it only to not like it. So I put it on hold at the library, but the book is so in demand that the hold list was crazy long. I'm finally up next. It's on its way, so I'll be picking it up later this week. So I'll finally be reading that, and I'll be posting a review of that on the channel. After that, and after Rhythm of War, I will be reading My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. The reason I'm going to be picking this up is because also in February, I'm going to an event in New York City. There is an author conversation with Stephen Graham Jones and Paul Tremblay at the Strand bookstore. So I got tickets for that, and part of that event was I bought with the ticket a signed copy of the sequel to this book, which I think is called Don't Fear the Reaper. So I figure if I'm gonna own the sequel, I should probably read the first book in the series. Hopefully I like it. That would be pretty unfortunate. So after My Heart is a Chainsaw, depending on how much I enjoy that book, I'll either move directly into that next book, Don't Fear the Reaper, or if I kind of liked it and maybe I want to try something else, I am going to finally continue my Dune read with Children of Dune. It's been a while. I've been kind of putting this one off, even though I loved Dune Messiah. I don't know what it is, but every time I look at Children of Dune, I'm like, I'll get to it eventually. But no, I have to get to it. I want to continue Dune, so this is going to happen. So that's going to be at least 4 books for February, and February is a short month, so hopefully I'll be able to hit even that mark. If I go over it, I go over it, and I'll tell you about that in my February wrap-up. But I do have some graphic novels I want to read as well. The first is The Department of Truth, Volume 4, The Ministry of Lies. This is one of my favorite comics that's ongoing right now. If you're not familiar with the Department of Truth, please look it up. It's about a government organization that is basically monitoring conspiracy theories around the world, because in the comic, if enough people believe in the conspiracy, they accidentally make it true. And the Department of Truth is trying to control that from getting out of hand. It's a really interesting graphic novel. It's a really interesting series. Highly recommend it. And the last graphic novel that I intend to read in February is The Big Guy and Rusty the Robot by Frank Miller and Jeff Darrow. I just really want to get more into Jeff Darrow's work. I've seen some of his work. It's absolutely incredible, but I haven't read anything that he's actually contributed to. So this will be my first Jeff Darrow, and hopefully there will be more in the future. Not sure if I'll be doing a review of any of these graphic novels, but they are on my list for reading. Okay, so as far as channel updates, all of the books that I mentioned earlier, the prose books, there are reviews of those up on my channel. Some other videos that I did 2 videos on my vintage book collections. I did a vintage book collection and a vintage comic collection. So check that out. I got some really old books there, some books from the 1800s. So if you like rare vintage stuff, definitely check those out. I also did a list for my favorite graphic novels of the year. Even if you're not a graphic novel reader, I put books on that list that might appeal to someone who isn't typically reading that medium. So give it a shot. You might find something you like. I also put out a video where I am comparing Mistborn eras 1 and 2 and giving my personal preference on which one I think is better. Really proud of that video, so definitely please check that one out. I also put up a video way in the beginning of the month about Goodreads and why I did not set a Goodreads goal this year. So check that out if you're interested as well. As far as other content moving forward, I don't really plan that far ahead. There is one video that I'm really excited to be making now. I'm scripting it about the Stormlight Archive. So look forward to that probably either later this week or early next week. And that's about it. Let me know what you think of all of those books that I mentioned, if you've read them, if you have recommendations for me. Thanks for watching this. Thank you for spending some time with me today. But now, it's time to get back to reading.